Warning, incoming game over. Warning, incoming game over.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa. Not quite as exciting of a game as last time, as the Sens follow up their 8-7 overtime win against the Kings with a 3-1 loss to the New Jersey Devils. But I'm excited to be joined by another one of our new team members here, Mike Czar. How you doing, Mike?
Doing good, doing good. Yeah, honestly, today was probably not the most entertaining game to watch from a fan standpoint, especially for my first time popping up on Game Over this season. But it's always nice to be fun. It's always nice to hop in. It's always nice to be able to not only watch the game with a more critical eye than a regular fan, but also to be able to talk about it more in depth afterwards, as opposed to just tweeting about it a couple times.
For sure. And if the people watching haven't seen you yet on our channel, you want to tell them a little bit about what you've been doing for us?
Yeah, you might not have noticed it if you're more specific to the post-game reaction streams that we have going on here, but I'm the daily news guy. I do the Game On part of Game Over for the Game Over Ottawa channel. So I do content Monday to Friday. It's usually a video somewhere in between 5-10 minutes long. It's not meant to be super long. And I cover news. And while I kind of cover it in a more basic way, lineups, injuries, anything notable that you might have seen on social media, I do try and keep it a little bit interesting. Not to mention I have a cork board set up. And as big events and important things come up, whether it's injuries or signings like the Allmark extension, I put them up on the board. And by the end of the season, we're gonna have a major collage worth of news to cover. And I'll probably over time I'm gonna start stringing things together. There isn't so much right now where I've done that, but it's gonna get pretty chaotic
Yeah,
there,
it's going to
which
build
I
up.
hope reflects the momentum of the year, whether it's a good, bad, mediocre. I just hope that that board, whenever the season's over, everyone can look at it and they can see how it started, see how it finished, and kind of remember each moment.
Yeah, the progression of that board that you've got there visually is going to be really interesting to see as it fills up throughout the year. And yeah, we know obviously our bread and butter here is the post game shows, but we're looking to bring even more content your way. So if you just like any afternoon weekday, if you've got 5 to 10 minutes, check out the channel, and Mike will probably have a daily Sens news ready to go for you. They often, if it's a game day, it counts as like sort of a pre-game preview as well too.
Yeah, I try my
So
best to make it that way, yeah.
yeah, so super glad to have you on the show here tonight for your first, first official appearance on a live
Yes,
stream.
'cause
I did have you on a
yeah,
couple years ago as a
one time.
guest, but
Yeah.
yeah, we might as well just get into it. I'm thinking for the first period segment here today, I want to frame it as what went wrong for the Sens tonight, because I do think there were some positives and it wasn't like a total bummer of a game despite the result. So let's get the negatives out of the way first.
All right,
What do you think? What do you want to start with?
It seems like the year so far has been defined by special teams, and
Hmm.
usually in a negative sense for the Sens. Thankfully, the power play seems to be extremely hit or miss, to the point of it being the reason they win the game or the reason they lose the game. But today, in particular, it was the reason they lost the game. Not only did they fail to capitalize on their first power play, but then they also had that shorthanded goal on the second power play off of a pretty lazy giveaway. So it always seems to be like the early parts of the game, whether it's the first or like the first half of the second, there's some sort of special teams occurrence, whether it's a bad power play or a bad penalty kill, that leads the momentum the Sens had built at 5-on-5 up until that point to be completely moot, and they have to start fighting, into the game over again. And while that is possible, it's not something that a team can't get out of if it's one or two goals against. It just wasn't enough in this game, and it was just a shame to see how no matter how well they play on 5v5, the special teams are still costing them,
Hmm.
even after the previous games where it was obvious that was a problem.
Yeah, you're totally right, and it's a bit ironic that the Sens' one goal tonight ends up being a power play goal, because before that, it was just a complete momentum killer for the team tonight, specifically that second one. And when you think of the power play being a momentum killer, typically you'd think a game where you get a lot of power plays and you go like 0 for 4, 0 for
Yeah,
5, or
it's like
something like that.
constant.
But I think it was only 3 power play chances. I think it ended up being 1 for 3, I think.
Yeah,
And you look
because
at
they had
that on
a
paper,
yeah.
and that's pretty good, right? Like decent percentage, like
Yeah, like
33%, but
it's not bad,
it's
but
just
it just
that.
happened to be one of those games where there was very few penalties on both teams, so
Mhm,
those power plays meant more, and the
exactly.
Sens had the better power plays in terms of timing in the game earlier on. They had the better opportunity to go ahead off the special teams, and somehow they ended up from those two down a goal.
Exactly. Yeah, I think I'm gonna quickly peek at the penalty summary just to fact check myself real quick. But yeah, so it was we got the first two power plays. New Jersey had one in between them. But yeah, and that second power play specifically was the one where we pretty much lost all momentum, and it felt like we never really got it back at any point after that one. I think it was a little bit shades of last season where the second period was always the big problem for the Sens, and it wasn't exactly a disaster period, just the two goals against, like, they definitely could have come back from that, but it was just the complete mistake on the penalty kill that really took the wind out of the team's sails, right? Because before that, they looked pretty good.
Yes, well, I think if you were to look at the whole game, like, as a whole, if you look at their 5v5 play, it's been a consistent trend that the Sens have been playing decently 5-on-5 until something happens that allows them to either lose confidence, or it just makes it what they have to start fighting back from a deficit, right? Which is always tough to do, no matter what team you are. And I just think this game in particular, they were playing fine 5-on-5, but there wasn't really any momentum that they were trying to build. It didn't feel like there was as much engagement from some players that we would expect to really rile up the team and create sparks, whether it was getting good chances or board battles. I thought were a pretty bad thing this game for the Sens. It was just one of those games where I feel like while there is really key things to point out and say they didn't do good enough in this, they didn't do good enough in that, it's a mix. There are also some very good aspects of the game where you can say they played well and then they just faced tough opposition. Because if there's one thing I know we're going to talk about later, is that the Devils, especially now they have Markstrom and Jake Allen, they're going to be a pretty good team, in my opinion. They're probably going to be one of the top teams. I believe they're in the Metro. I'm so limited to the Atlantic
Metro,
in my knowledge. But yeah, like, they're going to be a good team in the Metro, where last year I know their goaltending and injuries was their main issue. This year, I don't think the goaltending is going to be an issue at all if Markstrom keeps playing like he is.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue based on how Markstrom was tonight. And, he did get a little bit of help from his post, too. That's another thing that we should include in what went wrong tonight is the 4 goal
I know
posts
Damien already mentioned in chat, but yeah, 4 posts today.
Yeah,
and,
exactly. If one of those goes in the first half of the game, because I think
different.
3 of them were in the first half of the game, right? Then that could have totally changed things. So we do have to say a little bit of bad luck for the Sens tonight, too. Which, considering this is the segment of what went wrong, I'm happy to be saying that it was just bad luck for a lot of it, And
yeah,
you mentioned the 5-on-5 play as well. It's like it was mostly good overall, but I will say in terms of generating offense, there wasn't really any sustained pressure. I found a lot of just like one and done shots or chances,
back and forth.
And again, that emphasizes how important the power play is, because the power play is where you should be getting those types of shifts with pressure in the offensive zone. And just that second power play, I think that was like the biggest clown show shift I've ever seen from the second unit there. And I was so mad that they didn't go on a line change before that shorthanded goal, because it was already like 50 seconds into the power play at that point, and they
already gave up a 2-on-1 chance.
They had already turned it over twice and not done anything in the offensive zone. So that was just tough to watch. But at least outside of that one shift, I can't get too mad overall.
Yes, the first power play wasn't great in the sense, I don't think it actually generated any shots on target, but it seemed to have a better flow to it, obviously, than the second. And the third resulted in a goal, so you can't be too mad in that. And if there's one thing I really do want to stress, since we're talking about the negatives first, for everyone who's harping on the goaltending in this game, it wasn't the problem.
Definitely.
In 2 facets. One, he had a much better performance than he did, obviously, at the start of the Kings game, Anton Forsberg. And he made a lot of saves that, if it wasn't for those, the Sens would have been out of it, by the middle to the start of the second period. Looking back in retrospect, they were, but that wasn't because of Forsberg. That was because of the problems we had when it came to scoring. And if there's one thing that, lots of people say, which it's factually correct most of these times, goalies can't score. No matter how bad a goalie performs, if you look back to the Kings game, the Sens won the Kings game, despite how bad their goaltenders were, because they persevered and they scored a lot of goals on their power plays. If you can't score on the power plays this time around, no matter how good your goaltender plays, it's gonna be at best overtime. So I feel bad for Forsberg, because this was a decent bounce back game. It wasn't perfect, obviously, but the first goal was a double deflection, one of them off of your own player. The second one came off of a really bad turnover, 2-on-1 on the power play, and then obviously the third was more so just like it was like a triple rebound where lots of the Sens were in front of the net, but none of them were blocking or preventing passing lanes or covering their man. So I feel bad for Forsberg. The team kind of let him down a little bit today, especially because everyone's going to look to Forsberg and say he still didn't play great today. And while I'm not necessarily disagreeing, I am very much against the fact that he played bad. Yeah. Neutral, I can agree with him playing neutrally, but he's also your backup. So it's definitely, he's not going to steal you every game.
Definitely not the goalie's fault tonight.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to, before we move into like the positive tonight, is that I think the forward lines could definitely use a shuffle after this game, because we're talking mostly
100%.
about special teams, but when I think about scoring chances tonight, the most, other than all the ones that hit the post, the scoring chances I remember the most came from Adam Gaudette and the fourth line, which is not good. Like, I feel like the entire top six tonight was just not there. And again, kind of ironic. I don't know if the goal ended up getting changed to Brady. Do you know if it did?
I'm not entirely sure, but I saw the shot pretty dead on in the replays they showed in the game.
I mean, you know what?
It wouldn't make any sense for it to be Giroux's.
Yeah, you know what?
Either
way, if that's Giroux's goal or Tkachuk's goal, it's again ironic because they both were not good tonight. But I wanted to say Tkachuk specifically, I was a little disappointed in, because I remember the last game against the Devils towards the end of last season where he came out and got like 17 hits or something, like an NHL record, scored a big goal in that game too. And obviously you can't be doing that every night. That's not possible remotely, but we have high standards for Brady, and I've been a little bit disappointed with his first few games of the season. At least if he got credit for that goal, it's great that he's on the board now, and he did also hit the post on a deflection in the first period. So hopefully the floodgates will start to open for him, but I just didn't really like notice him making much of like a physical impact today either, which is not what you expect from the captain.
It's just so weird to say, looking at the team. If you were to go to the stats sites and look at the Sens' like points distribution amongst their players, it's not bad, but a lot of that has to do with the Kings game. If you were to remove the Kings game, it's
definitely
so much of the points have come from not top six. Like, whether it's defensemen or the bottom six. It's crazy how slow of a start the top six has had, considering that they're all healthy and playing, as far as we know, healthy and playing not poorly 5-on-5. They're playing good 5-on-5. It's just they're not getting as many chances as I think they deserve. And while part of that has to do with luck, part of it just also has to do with the fact of they're probably not taking shots when they should be. They're probably not driving the net when they should be. And I am also disappointed in Tkachuk. Now, if there's one thing I can't say of Tkachuk, it's that he doesn't try. But I feel like today he was invisible, and you just can't have that for a captain. You can't have that for a first-line player like Brady Tkachuk.
Definitely. And, you bring up the bottom six being more impactful in terms of like the scoring spread. So since we're on that note, I'm going to switch it over to period 2 here. Now I have the buzzer sound effect. Unfortunately, Mike's camera shifted over to the side a bit when I changed that. Little OBS glitches, but don't worry, you're still centered enough in the frame. Anyway, to throw it to the positives, we can actually like hype up the bottom six a little bit, especially like, as I said, I think Adam Gaudette had the best scoring chances tonight. He had a couple of good ones. Zach McEwen was still like really energetic out there for sure. And I don't know, I was kind of, the last show I did, I was kind of not too hot on the Pinto, Amadio, Greg line, or not Greg,
Perron.
Yeah. But like overall, I think the bottom six has had a pretty good impact. What do you think?
I think that two things can be true about the third line at the same time. They're not scoring as much as they should, but they're playing really good defensively, which is what a bottom six line should do.
Yeah, I think that's what
Perron's not scoring as much as he should.
For.
Yeah, Perron and Amadio, they're both not putting up a lot of points, but they're also both playing well. I can never point to Perron and Amadio and say like, oh, they didn't, they forecheck. They always forecheck hard. They're always trying. They lead to a lot of giveaways from the enemy team. And obviously Pinto is more so the offensive force, or has been more so the offensive force in recent games. And as for the fourth line, I don't know what the hell happened to Zach McEwen from last year to this year. But he's playing with so much more energy. He's forechecking a lot better. He's leading a lot more turnovers. And obviously already has scored the same amount of goals that he scored, all of last year, just because of that one game against the Kings.
Yeah, so, I think that Zach McEwen did the old Monstars from Looney Tunes.
Yeah,
just stole someone's talent over the summer
Tkachuk.
because
Just for now.
he
Like,
took
yeah.
all of Kachuk's talent for the first like week of the season here. He's been great. He's gone from a player where I'm like, oh, I didn't want to see him in the top, 13 forwards on this team to just like totally earning a spot on the fourth line so far, which has been awesome.
Yeah, and a thing about McEwen that I'm not sure whether it's because of this, but I have a bit of a theory of my own. I could be completely making stuff up right now. But I feel like last year his role was very much the enforcer. I'm going to make sure to hit people hard, forecheck as hard as I can, fight maybe once or twice and lose because every Sens enforcer in recent years is a bad fighter, and aside from Tkachuk. And I'm going to, get my penalty minutes and see if I even make a positive value for the team. Where this year, it seems like his role is a lot more like a more proper, fourth liner of, I'm going to do the most with the minutes I have. I'm still going to hit hard, I'm still going to forecheck hard, but he's a lot more involved with the offensive play, and he's also been better in back-checking. It's not just been like a forechecking guy, like they've been more well-rounded as a whole, that whole line. And I feel like another really good reason for that is Nick Cousins. Every time I've seen Nick Cousins in play, he's not doing anything offensively aside from maybe a couple passes on the boards. I'm like, okay, good job. You kept possession. It could have been dangerous. But he's led to a lot of takeaways. He's delivered a lot of good hits. And I have never seen him, at least not to the extent of some other top six players. I haven't seen him so far out of position where I'm mad at him.
Yeah, Nick Cousins, he had a great steal in the first period on Jack Hughes, I believe it was, and then I think the fourth line took the puck the other way. I don't remember if they generated a scoring chance, but I had written that down as
transition anyway.
Yeah, great steal by Nick Cousins, and that leads me to I looked up the Corsi stats for the forward lines. So specifically Nick Cousins on that line there with Adam Gaudette and Zach McEwen. Their Corsi for percentage was just under 77%. So
our eyes weren't lying. Like
yeah.
they played really good, and it was just a shame because obviously the thing with most fourth lines is they're not like the best scorers. They're meant to be more defensive lines used in rare situations or more aggressive in the sense of like fighting or delivering checks. I'm both ecstatic that the Sens have a bottom six that actually can do stuff offensively and transition the puck well. I'm also really disappointed this happens to be at the same time the top six is performing.
Right.
Because if both of these was happening at the same time, the Sens would obviously be winning games pretty handedly.
To put it into perspective as well, if I can say that word properly. The third line as well, Perron, Pinto, Amadio, they had just under 53%, which is still quite good.
Like, it's okay.
And
That's
then,
fine.
as you said about the top six, the lines did get shuffled a little bit, but for most of the game...
I saw a couple of times where it wasn't the lines of which I wrote down this morning.
But for most of the game, Tkachuk, Giroux, Stützle was 47%, and Gregor, Norris, Batherson was just under 43%. So
not like getting caved in, but definitely not the same performance as the bottom six.
Not controlling
somehow.
the play like the other team, or like the other lines. Sorry, it's so totally matches the eye test with the stats here tonight. And like I try not to fully go off of stats, but when you see those numbers for your top six, it's not looking too good. But at least we can say that the bottom six is carrying their weight. And it's a nice change because I feel like the last 5 years or so of Sens hockey, the fourth line has always just been like completely unplayable and getting caved in all the time. So it's a pleasant surprise.
Yes, and this is another positive I like to point out. The top six we know can perform. Even though they're not performing now, this is the early parts of the season. Tkachuk and Drew both had a kid. So maybe they're getting less sleep, I don't know.
That's true,
but,
the new dad effect.
And obviously the second line in particular had set to have Ridley Gregg on it before the injury that led Noah Gregor to fill in his role. So I understand if the top six still needs a little bit of time to gel. I am really happy that the bottom six has been figured out, at least so far. I'm hoping this is not something where in 2 months we're already talking about these lines aren't good enough, we need to change them. Because if this is how it's going to be, and this is how it holds, and they keep performing like they have been so far this year, I'm really happy because the forward depth on this team will be really solid. We don't have to worry about all our goals coming from Norris, Batherson, Stützle, Tkachuk, Giroux.
That was one of my biggest worries going into the season too, was the depth on both forward and defense. So, like you said, we know the top six is going to figure it out at some point. Maybe they need a little bit of a line shuffle, but the bottom six impressing early on is like a huge positive for the team for me.
And it's also interesting too because Noah Gregor, who was in the bottom six, got moved up to the top six because of the Gregg injury. And honestly, I think he was probably the most noticeable person out of those three. Out of Batherson had a game where he was near invisible, not bad, but invisible. Norris had a couple of good plays, but unfortunately that was led to some of the posts. And Gregor, though, was really, as usual, really fast, good at forechecking, and he, like, instead of just hitting the post, he, like, hard off the post, off one of those plays, I think he tried to go short side.
I thought that went in. Like, when I saw
Me
it,
too.
I thought it was off the back bar because there was no ping sound for it hitting the post.
Yes,
And I was
it
like,
sounded like it
the
hit
back
net.
bar
Yeah.
is quieter, but no. I don't think I even saw a replay of it on the broadcast.
Nope,
Obviously, it didn't go
didn't
in.
show it.
Yeah, that one fooled me there for sure. And, last show I was saying, I don't like Noah Gregor on that second line. I know he's filling in for Ridley Gregg, but hey, tonight he not that the second line was great, but as you said, he was the most noticeable guy on that second line. So I have to give him props.
Yeah, but that also, tying back to the negatives, how is it that the guy filling in for your regular second line left winger is the one playing the best on it?
Totally. And yeah, I was gonna point out Drake Batherson as a bit of a positive, but not in like the way that he really got anything done. Just that I've noticed over the past couple games, he's had some good stick handles and some good steals in the offensive zone to almost create a chance. But what I think the problem is that I'm not noticing any chemistry between him, Norris, and Gregor. It's like if that line gets a chance, it's just like one guy going in off the rush, like how Gregor hit the post today. I think Batherson has been moving pretty well out there, and he's been a dog on the puck, but just I feel like his line mates haven't really clicked. So if I was to make a line change for next game, I would maybe go Tkachuk Norris Batherson or Tkachuk Stützle Batherson just to mix it up.
Yeah, because I feel like very much the problem with the top six right now is you have pairs that work well together, but not trios.
Yeah,
And even though the first line is fine, like we've seen Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux work before, if one of them has an off game, it's really hard for the other two to really make things work. Whether it's Tkachuk and Stützle and Giroux having an off game like he did today until he helped with the power play goal, or in this case the second line where Norris and Batherson are usually a good pair, but if one of them has an off game, you'd want that left winger to step it up and really help make sure that it balances out. And I don't think Noah Gregor is that kind of player, though he did play well, if that makes sense. Like he's not the guy you put in on a line to make it fit. He's the guy you put in on a line because you need someone to fill in, which is what's happening right now.
Definitely. And to wrap it up for the positive segment, just quickly, I would say Anton Forsberg was mostly a positive tonight. You did go over it a little earlier, so we don't need to deep dive into it. But yeah, from your backup goalie getting over a 900 save percentage on 30 shots, you can't ask for much more than that. I think it was a positive step in the right direction for Forsberg here tonight to prove that he can still be a capable backup, because it was getting real sketchy after that last game and really like the whole of last season. So shout out to Forsberg tonight for sure, because I think he did well enough to give the team a chance to win the game. Like it wasn't 3-0 until like 5 minutes left or so, and like we said earlier, if the Sens had some puck luck, that easily could have been like
2-1, which would have been like a lot more reasonable of a lead to try and get back into, or even if it was 3-1, even if we'd scored that one and they took the and they still got that third goal. I imagine it would have been a lot more tangible if the Sens still score that power play goal, where maybe they still have enough time to somehow steal a point from it.
I think the biggest thing with these bad starts from Forsberg in the last year and also from Korpisalo last season too is that when it becomes 3 and 4 goals against, it's often happening like before the midway point of the second period, like early
which wasn't the case today.
Yeah, early in games we would often be down like 3 or 4 goals already with those guys in net, but Forsberg managed to keep it to just 2 until very late in the game, so definitely full credit to him tonight.
And not to mention, one of the other positives I can say from this game is that if Ullmark and Forsberg are the tandem, and this is the Forsberg that we're expected to see this year and not the Kings Forsberg, then the tandem should be all right, at least in my opinion. Then again, Ullmark didn't have the best game before he went on this little small injury, break to help with that strain of his in that game against Montreal. But I think we can all bet that Ullmark is going to play more like he did in the Panthers game more often than he did in the Montreal game.
Yeah, if he gets back to full health, he'll bounce back for sure. And then, yeah, the last positive, which I did not expect to be saying as a positive, is I'm going to throw Travis Hamonic into the positives column tonight.
He wasn't noticeable.
Yeah,
which is great.
He wasn't noticeable, which is exactly what you want from that man in your top 6D, especially like I gotta check how many minutes he actually played, but he was lining up on the first pair.
And it does help a lot when you have 44. Jake Sanderson as your pair.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, yeah, like he wasn't the only thing about Hamonic, which I'm still going to say, and lots of people know, is as soon as he gets the puck in the offensive zone, he shoots. And it's starting to get more annoying than it is helpful. But defensively, he wasn't the Travis Hamonic of which we know, who's unable to clear the puck, unable to make quick passes, making some small mistakes behind the boards, which leads to bigger mistakes, which usually leads to a goal against. In fact, I would even argue that the one who made more obvious mistakes today was Jensen.
Definitely.
He's the one who completely lost his man that led to that third goal. And Norris couldn't, go from covering, I think it was his man to the right, to covering his man on the left and stopping that rebound from going in. So Hamonic was fine, and if this is the Hamonic we're going to see until Zook comes back, I really hope it is. I understand why they pair him with Sanderson. First pair, anytime you see Hamonic on a first pair, I'm going to be worried.
Yeah.
But at least with Sanderson alongside him, you have someone who can, he's the best person to help fix those mistakes.
Definitely.
He's so good at skating, clearing the puck, passing. Like, he is the ultimate guy. Shabbat's too error prone now, unfortunately. And Cleven's not ready, unfortunately.
As long as Sanderson has the puck for the majority of the time that him and Hamonic are on the ice, like just Travis Hamonic give the puck to Jake Sanderson, he will be the breakout, he will create the offense. And then
all you have to worry about is not messing up in terms of man coverage, in terms of like extremely simple passes or getting it over to Sanderson, and that's what he did. So yeah, full credit to Hamonic. I was very worried, and he was not the problem at all today.
Exactly. I totally agree on that. Now, before we throw it to our third segment, just going to have a quick ad read for the flagship show of Game Over Network on our main channel, the Game Over Network channel on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to that one if you are not already, because we have Hyperdrive Hockey, which is covering all things hockey across various leagues in multiple countries. Whatever it is and wherever it is, Max, Daphne, and Kev have you covered for all your hockey news with a steady dose of fun fan engagement. You can find Hyperdrive Hockey on the Game Over Network YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts on the Hyperdrive Hockey page at thegameovernetwork.com. So be sure to check that out. Show some love to the new members of the network, our new flagship show over there. But for now, we're going to throw it into the third segment for today as that buzzer goes off, which I wanted to talk a little bit about how I'm kind of jealous of the New Jersey Devils, and they, because I feel like, here's the thing, I need to set this up in the way that explains it as best I can. I feel like for the last few seasons, the Sens and the Devils were two of the top teams where people would say, oh, that team's going to have a breakout year and make the playoffs. The Devils were actually able to do it 2 years ago. Obviously, the Sens haven't been able to. And then last year, both teams were sunk by completely horrible goaltending. We all know about how that went in Ottawa, and New Jersey had it just as bad. Like, I'm pretty sure these two teams had the two worst save percentages in the league for the whole season last year. So I feel like it's eerily similar for how those teams' stories went last season. Despite that, the Devils were still clearly a better team than the Sens, with both of them missing the playoffs, but the Devils still being ahead. And there's just a lot of roster moves the Devils have made over the last couple of years that I really like. I don't know about you, Mike, but are you as jealous of the Devils as I am?
I feel like I'm jealous of the Devils because they rebuilt without having to go through that multiple year lull that a lot of teams have to go through.
They've been more up and down, eh?
Yeah, like they're a lot more up and down. And it's so weird to think of the Devils and see what they are now, and kind of like just to think back, what was the last truly, like, you mentioned their bad goaltending, season last year, but like in comparison to the Sens, not of last year, but 2 years ago, right? When's the last time a Devils had a season like that? I think it was the year after they had the Taylor Hall MVP season. They didn't have a good year. Mm-hmm. But even then, it wasn't, at least probably not to us since we're not New Jersey Devils fans, but I don't think it's as memorably disastrous as it was for Sens, or for the Sens at that time. And they picked up really good players. They got some lottery luck, obviously, but they picked up some really good players along the way. Heischer and Hughes being obvious great pickups in the draft. But then also in trades, like John Marino, even though I know he's not still there, was a nice
Yeah.
pickup that every Sens fan wanted to
Everyone
freaking get
wanted
during that
him.
offseason.
And then they traded him away, and we're all still like, why didn't we get him the second time? He was available twice. I had written this down actually, is that they originally acquired Marino for a third and Ty Smith, and then they were able to flip him for 2 seconds.
Yeah,
So
so they got better out of that deal than they started, and they had John Marino for a time.
that asset management is
Good.
quite impressive,
Yeah.
especially compared to like the asset management that we went through with Jacob Chikrin.
Yep.
At least that was split between two different GMs, so you can't blame the current
Yeah.
GM for what the previous guy gave up. But I see something like that, and I'm like, damn, we could have used that player, and they used him for a bit, and then they moved on. They got even better right-handed defensemen, which I'll talk about as well. The craziest thing to me is that tonight Brett Pesce and Luke Hughes were not even in the lineup. Both of those guys
Mentioned
are
that in the
injured.
Daily News.
Yep, both of those guys are injured, and the Devils' defense still looks fantastic. Part of that is having like great young guys like
Yeah.
is it? Casey and Nemec on the bottom
Nemitz,
pair.
yeah, they're the bottom pair. But the one thing about the Devils, I think, right now, because they're out Luke Hughes, is that they're more defensive setup right now. They're letting their offense do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to actually stuff in the offensive zone, but they're perfectly capable of passing the puck when they need to. They're not like defensive. They're not offensive liabilities. They're just more defensive focused, like Siegenthaler, Kovacevic, Casey and Nemitz, and even sorry, I'm forgetting who the top pair lefty is. Brendan Dillon.
Brendan Dillon. I like the Brendan
yeah.
Dillon signing too.
Yeah, like obviously the one worry about him is his age, but aside from that, he's proven that he's a very capable defensive defenseman. He's able to play on the top pair like he did in Winnipeg, I believe. But it's more so just the fact where it's like a lot of your offense and that defense comes from Dougie Hamilton, who is still Dougie Hamilton. Every time he shot the puck, I was worried. And then obviously the offensive depth on New Jersey is just another level. The fact that they had Jesper Bratt as a third liner and then he got that good is crazy. If anything, it'd be like if Ridley Gregg all of a sudden had a 70, 80-point season. Like, to compare it for Sens fans here. Like, a guy who you know has talent and you know is very capable as like a fast forechecker, skilled with the puck, but it's more so that sort of, defense, a very good offensive forechecker. Jesper Bratt just turned into like an ultimate, like, I can just do everything.
Yeah, he just
And I'm
became
so
a
jealous.
superstar out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Which is huge for your depth because that pushes other guys down the lineup.
Yeah,
the other
exactly.
guy that I want to mention from their defense, I think, is like the one name we haven't mentioned so far was Jonathan Kovacevic. This dude played 25 minutes tonight, and they got him from the Habs for a third-round pick. And like when that trade happened, I was like, why are the Habs letting this guy go? I guess it's just because they want to play all their younger guys on defense. It makes sense. They had a lot of defensemen.
Kovacevic's that old, is he?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think he's probably like 25, 26 or something. So he's older than the Habs rookies, but it was
Yes,
kind of
but like
weird
he's
to me.
he's not old.
Yeah, it was kind of weird to me that they let him go for so cheap. And now that I see him doing really well on the Devils, I'm like, for a third round pick, if we could have freaking Kovacevic on our third pair instead of like Hamonic or JBD, which they weren't bad tonight, but that would improve the depth so much.
Yes,
if we could've picked up a
just
guy
getting
like that.
more depth. Yeah, exactly. And that reminds me of another thing that was mentioned about the Sens earlier before the games even started. And that's how the new ownership, this also, I'm not sure if this is entirely true, but at least it makes sense in my eyes, and I'm sure it would yours as well. The Sens are waiting to see how good the team does on its own to determine whether they want to actually trade for more things. They want to see what they got, which I completely understand, especially because this is a team that you didn't own beforehand. You want to see what you have, and then you'll make your decisions. Which is why, as much as I didn't like it heading into the season, I really wanted more defensive depth. And in fact, they gave up most of their defensive depth. In Brandstrom, for example, who probably would have been a really nice thing. But I get it. They wanted to see what they had before they started making trades for other things. Not just with how good they are, but also if you start playing well, we'll get you more stuff. But if you're not going to play well enough, then it's less going to be about us getting you depth now and more so in the offseason, more so whenever the next year comes around. You got to play your way out of this, so we know what you're capable of.
But yeah, I'm just so jealous of the
Yeah, I
Devils
took it off
having
topic,
this.
my bad.
No, no,
But
it's okay. I was just gonna say on along that lines of what you said. I'm so jealous of the Devils having this defense depth and forward depth and goalie depth now, just ready
now,
to
yeah.
go at the start of the season. They knew what their problems were and they addressed them. Like they have all these young defensemen coming up, and they still insulated them with like some good veterans, as opposed
Yeah.
to on the Sens, you kind of just give Tyler Clevin the spot on the third pair, like regardless of if he was good or bad in camp, he was gonna
He's
get
the
that
best thing
spot.
left.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a different approach from Steve Stais, just really trying to evaluate everything that the team already has. Where I kind of like how New Jersey was just like, yeah, we need this, we need this. They went out and got them. And I mean, hey, at least we got Olmark. Like they got Markstrom. That's another thing that kind of ties these two teams together. Is with those horrible goaltending performances last year, they both addressed their biggest need, which was the goaltending, at least. So,
Yes.
so at least we have that. And the Devils' track record is not perfect. Like they do have some moves, kind of like it was Pavel Zacha for Eric Haula. Eric Haula did score tonight, but that's a trade that hasn't.
That's
aged
still a
too
trade
well.
that's leaning better towards Boston.
Yeah, and the whole Vitek Vanacek acquisition last year, and they dumped him away now,
Yeah.
just like Korpisalo. The Andre Palat signing. Did you know he's making $6 million?
On the fourth line.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not all perfect for the Devils, but
No, but
I do have to say
it does look like it's leaning better than the Sens are right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think we mind talking too much about it, especially because they're in a different division.
Yeah.
Like we're not facing off them directly in the standings, so if they're doing well, cool.
Exactly.
Hopefully we could see each other in the playoffs sometime. But as of right now, it's more so just a comparison of like two houses in two different suburbs. Which one's doing better?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that we can look to with how New Jersey has handled their rebuild and say like that's how you do it, because even though they took the step backward last year, it was just really that bad goaltending, and I guess they felt they needed a coaching change too. Which hey, it's funny that it took me this long into the show to mention that Travis Green did coach the Devils last year at the end of
Interim.
the season,
Yeah.
as the interim, and they didn't bring him back, so a little bit unfortunate that he couldn't get the win.
The
against
Devils
old
didn't
team.
do great towards the end of the last season, towards the end of the season when he was the interim coach, but very much in a similar vein to the Sens of last year. How much of it was coaching and how much of it was the goaltending? I mean, yes, I understand there was a big difference in the Sens here, and I completely agreed when it came to letting DJ Smith go, but like at some point the goalies have just got to make saves. And if they don't, then obviously your defense is going to look worse because their confidence is going to be shot, and every one of the first four shots they face is going to be a 1-0 deficit for him. And with Travis Green, he was only in partway for the season, so they probably didn't stick with him because they had someone else in mind, less so than they didn't want him to be a part of it. But I could be also just talking complete, nonsense. I genuinely think they probably just didn't want him for one of a multitude of reasons. And the Sens did, because they saw that his track record has been, if he has a good goalie, like Allmark, he usually can handle pretty good teams.
For sure. So yeah, definitely a little bit jealous of the Devils, I would say, for both of us. They're a great team. Full credit to them tonight. Again, with missing two of their top four defensemen, just still very good defensive play 5-on-5 for them. So I think the Sens can look at the Devils as a team that it's like, yeah, we want to be like them going forward. But yeah, before we throw it to our final segment, which is responding to chat, of course, just another ad read real quick. Game Over Network is an independent production focused on community, inclusion, and quality people. If you're interested in supporting the Game Over Network, we have crowdfunding options available. In the description of this episode, you'll find a link to our Patreon, and we're also working on a page through La Ruche, which is a crowdfunding platform for companies that are based in Quebec. For La Ruche, we're aiming to raise $15K, and if we hit that goal, we'll gain access to government grants that will allow us to employ more people. And if you have any ideas for what you'd like to see as giveaways for these crowdfunding efforts, or perks for the Patreon or anything like that, let us know in the comments on Twitter, Instagram, or our Discord server, which is open to the public if you'd like to join and chat about all the Canadian teams with us. You can definitely hop in there as well.
Yeah, we'll be talking usually in the Game Over Ottawa chat. There's a text chat in there that we use, even though we also use obviously one for work, but more so like if more people start popping in, we'll obviously be discussing with everybody more so the Ottawa news.
Yeah.
And you can keep track of us.
We
obviously.
definitely love to grow the Ottawa community within the Game Over Discord and get that public chat for the Sens. growing there. And also, I missed an ad read earlier, so quickly we're also going to plug our merch, which unfortunately is going to have to cover up Mike's face here as I put this slideshow up on the screen.
Ooh, so worried.
Oh, you know what? Here it is. Here it is. It's a little bit scuffed right now. I got to switch to fourth period buzzer. You know what? I've scuffed it a little bit actually, so apologies for the video mess up here. But we have our merch. What better way to support something you love than by rocking it as clothing? Game Over's apparel line has dropped with 3 unique designs. Whether you feel the nostalgic pull of our retro skater design, want to make a statement with our established design, currently on sale, what you want to, or if you want to wear your love for goalies proudly with our live and die by the goalie design, or if you just need another coffee to get through the winter, we have you covered with mugs as well. Designed by Brady Chalice from Game Over Winnipeg. Use the QR code on stream right now. And take a look through our apparel store. It's already available for sale. We had a video on social media the other day with Andrew receiving the first of the merch, and it looked pretty great. So if you're a fan of the network, rep your community, rep your team. These designs are available for all 7 teams. So you see the Ottawa ones here. If you are a fan of another team, we have it for all 7 Canadian teams too. So yeah, check that out. And now, Mike, you are back on the screen. I am not covering you up anymore.
I'm back.
I'll leave that QR code up though.
Yeah, it's like right down here.
If anyone wants to check out the merch, it's on your other side, Mike. In the other.
Oh, really? Oh, sorry. I'm mirrored. My bad.
Yeah, close enough. Close enough. But yeah, anyway, now we are in the final segment of the night, which is going to be taking a look at chat real quick.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have.
Well, I noticed one very simple question, which I think would be it's nothing too crazy of a question, but I feel like this is probably someone we could talk about, and that is this is someone just asked very simply, was this JBD's first game of the season? Mm-hmm. And I feel like we didn't really talk much about JBD today.
That's true. That's true.
And I just feel like JBD was in a similar vein to Hamonic. I didn't see him being any key problem, but in a similar vein to Hamonic, he also wasn't any noticeable at all. That's usually better for a defenseman than it is for a person, in the top 6 or in the top 9. So I'm not going to say anything against JBD. He was perfectly serviceable today. If he stays in that role with Clevin, I feel like it's going to be good. And actually, speaking of which, the fact that he and Clevin worked well together, where Clevin and Hammock didn't, I think is a good sign. I think that maybe whenever Zub comes back into rotation, now there's that potential where, since Clevin GBD wasn't the complete fire sale that Clevin Hamonic was in recent games, it might be better to have JBD in that 6th slot on the right than Hamonic. But that was more so, that's just off of one game, so maybe after a couple of games, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, this was a good first game for JBD in the sense of he wasn't noticeable, which as a defenseman usually is a good thing.
I totally agree. The fact that we didn't even really think about to bring him up until this point in the show is a good thing for a defenseman like JBD. The reason that I pointed out Travis Hamonic like in the positives is mostly because there's a bit of a lesser expectation for him. It's sort of like, oh yeah, you just expect that there's going to be mistakes, whereas I think JBD has a bit more of a more calm and controlled style of game. You don't see.
He's like a transition defensive defenseman where Hamonic is a pure defensive defenseman. You're not going to see JBD ice it as much as Hamonic would. No offense to Hamonic, but that's very much like he has more potential to actually get it up ice.
I agree.
And even though I know this has absolutely nothing to do with this season, I remember there was this weird stat where it showed shot locations and which defensemen shot from said shot locations the most last season. And for some reason, JBD was the most from like the right that. By the like by where the boards would be, like the kind of top right hand corner. I guess I'm mirrored, right? So maybe like this. But like the right-hand corner of the ice, he was the one who shot, and it wasn't even shot. I think it was actually scored the most.
Goals, yeah, it was 2 goals.
Yeah, which is crazy because it was just, I think it was his only goals that he scored, just because it kind of goes to show like he doesn't move up the boards often. He's kind of very much stationary if he is in that offensive zone, but he's not incapable. It's more so just the fact that he is a transitional defensive defenseman, more in the vein of a Nick Jensen and less in the vein of a Travis Hamonic.
I think he could learn a lot from Nick Jensen. I mean, my opinion of Nick Jensen has kind of gone up and down depending on the game. Like, first game against Florida, I liked him. Game against Montreal, I did not like him. Today, he was mostly okay, just a couple of mistakes. But I feel like they play a similar style, with that just smooth skating and, like, decent puck skills. So I feel like JBD, there's definitely a spot for him in the lineup. Like Hamonic, I wasn't ecstatic that he played all 4 of these games until now, like without JBD seeing the lineup until now. But I think he did pretty well for his first game of the season.
And the other thing that I think the chat brought up, which is very fair, less of a question, more of just a remark from Damien. Our season might not be going exactly the way we hoped. But as is usual for Sens fans, at least we aren't Buffalo.
Yes, I saw that, and I wanted to bring that up too. They ended up losing to Columbus, right?
6-4. I have the stats open here on my second monitor. So, like, they scored goals, but they still lost.
Yeah.
I mean, 1-4-1 to start the year is not good,
That's
considering
absolutely
Buffalo
brutal.
is another one of those teams in that same tier of Ottawa where they could step up if things go their way. The worry with Buffalo is that they're starting to get into the same goaltending kind of cycle that the Sens were in 2-3 years ago, where they're trying to find the successor to, weirdly enough, in their case, Craig Anderson, who was the last good goalie. Where the same thing as the Sens, we're in the same boat there. We're still looking for a goaltender like Craig. Where the Sabres had Devin Levi and have Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, I believe it's how you say it, and they're talented young goalies, but they still haven't proven it quite yet at the NHL level. And add on to that a defense that, while it has a ton of, on paper talent, it seems to lean more offensive than defensive, which we know very well from, being Sens fans. It feels like these two teams are carbon copies of each other. But Buffalo somehow has had a longer time in the basement. So I just feel bad for them because because I know what it's like to be in that position as a Sens fan currently, in the past couple of years. I want them to do well to an extent. I want the Sens to do better. And I want them to get playoff spots over them. But it's that classic thing of, no matter where you look and no matter how bad of a spot you think you are, there's usually someone else who's worse. And unfortunately, right now, that's Buffalo.
Yeah, Buffalo, the laughingstock of the Atlantic Division in the early goings. Unfortunately for them, I'm butthurt because I had Devin Levi in one of my fantasy teams tonight.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, he beat Florida previously, so I was like, oh, you know what? Maybe he's going to take over the starting.
He's a rebound, get some form,
and then he's playing against Columbus. So I'm like, okay, that's a pretty easy start.
Potentially, potentially.
Absolutely roasted tonight. So I'm butthurt about that. But yeah, also with the Sabres, like the defense core, when they brought in Bowen Byram, everyone's like, oh, that's a sick trade because he was a high pick. And I'm like, what do they need another left-handed defense for? They have Dahlin,
This is the chicken
Power,
trade. This is the chicken trade.
Dahlin, Power, Byram, and Samuelson is also left-handed D. So at least one of them is playing on the right side, and ideally you don't want any of those guys on your third pair. So that might even just be your whole top 4 as left shots. I don't know how they line it up, but it
so
just
many
doesn't
people
make sense.
Yeah, so many people are bringing up the whole idea of Tampa whenever they won their 2 cups. They had a really good left side and a pretty weak right side. That was their build.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I understand the reasoning behind it because you saw a team be successful with that idea. The problem is when you looked at Tampa's build when they won the cup, their defensemen were all extremely good two-ways or very good defensively, especially on the third pair there.
Especially McDonough.
Yeah, it was McDonough, Sergachev, Hedman. Like, how do you beat Hedman, Sergachev, McDonough? Yeah. That was crazy. And while Hedman and Sergachev were both very capable offensively, they were both very tall, very strong, and very, at least at worst, decent defensively. Where, if you were to compare that to both Buffalo and Ottawa, I would argue that while they might have better offensive peaks with certain players, the defense is where it's very different. And obviously this is coming from a Sens fan, but I feel like the only defenseman that we've had in recent years on the left that could even play on Tampa, that build that won the cup, the 3 left-handed D, would be Chabot in his prime, which in a weird way of saying, before his injuries, whenever he was, almost was contending for the Norris, or Sanderson right now. Mm-hmm. In a weird way, Sanderson is kind of like Sergachev, where he's a young defenseman already good enough to be top 4. Like, there's no debate about it. He is great. And for those who don't know, it's just you haven't been watching enough Sens hockey, he is by far our best defenseman. It's just a shame that he's also one of the more inexperienced ones. It's not causing trouble in his game, obviously, but it's in both a good and a bad way. He's not at his final form yet. Mm-hmm. And the Sens would unfortunately need a final form Jake to really step up right now, the same way the Sabres have Dahlin, who's really the guy right now, right? But then you have Byram, Samuelson, and Power, who are all doing okay, but they're not, like, Owen Power for me, I might just be not following the Sabres as much as others. I'm sure he's doing fine. I haven't heard much of him.
Overrated first overall pick.
For
in
a
my
first
mind.
overall pick, I haven't heard
people trying to
much.
argue Owen Power versus Jake Sanderson, and it's like no, not an argument at
No,
the moment, not at all.
maybe offensively potentially, but
No, not even Owen.
but
Owen
defensively,
Power doesn't
no
score
way.
that many points. Not even.
Yeah, I might just be wrong because I know with Sanderson also we think of him as such a good offensive defenseman. He also hasn't scored too many points.
They're both like in that 35-point range right now, I think.
But I know for a fact Sanderson's better defensively.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't even need to watch Owen Power to know that Jake Sanderson's better than Buffalo currently better than Buffalo. Jake Sanderson's better than Owen Power currently defensively.
Yeah.
And he's not 6'6", so that's already a pretty good thing.
Last thing I'll say on Buffalo is obviously they have 2 more games played than the Sens, but the Sens are technically only 1 point ahead of them in the standings. With the 2 wins, 2 losses, and Sabres with 1 win, 1 overtime loss. So I will hold my tongue on roasting them too much now.
It's early season.
Just because
We're speaking what we've seen.
We could easily lose the next 2 or 3 games and then have
be in the same boat.
Buffalo go ahead of us in the standings too.
Yeah.
So I won't go too hard on them yet, although that's a real rough start.
Yeah. It's just a shame because, like we said, we're seeing mirrors of them with us, and we really want one of these teams that have been told you're going to do well to do well, right?
Totally.
And we're hoping it's the Sens, but if there's one thing we also know from being avid Sens fans, is that a bad start to the season can kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one more note from the chat. Higgy, I think he was the one who mentioned Jacob Bernard-Docker earlier. He said JBD had a goal, like you're talking about, from that right-hand side against the Flames last season in his hometown. Said he used to watch him play Junior A in Okotoks, and he's watching from Calgary, formerly from Ottawa too. So shout out to you watching from Calgary, and shout out to Okotoks as well. It's cool to see a player play in Junior A like that, and then see them in the NHL too. And you got to see him score in his hometown, that's awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, if they like we kind of said earlier, if they keep JBD in that third pair spot, there's the potential where our defensive pairs might look a lot more sound. And obviously Zub's out, so it's going to look a little bit worse now than it normally would be. But I feel like JBD, kind of like last year, you could probably say the same thing as well. This is a really good opportunity for him to really cement himself in that role. Because I just feel like the problem with JBD last year was that he never proved himself to be so much better than Hamnick, where he was a shoo-in. He would have some games where he was really good, and he would keep his role for the next game, and other games where he just wasn't covering the front of the net, or he wasn't good enough defensively, and Hamnick could probably fill into that role, even if there wasn't defensive injuries. So I just hope this year, injuries or not, I hope JBD can cement his role, because I feel like the team would be a lot more well-rounded that way, and we wouldn't have to worry as much about defense in the case of like transitional defense being a worry.
Definitely, and yeah, JBD was a first-round pick. So we'd like to see
late first rounder, but first rounder.
Yeah, we'd like to see the career pan out for him, and maybe playing on a pairing with Clevin, who wasn't around on the team last year very much. They were former UND teammates. I don't know if they were typically on the same pairing at UND, but maybe that'll help him out.
No, I believe he was even asked about this before the game started today.
Oh yeah.
Whether this was pre-game or just before during the game, whatever. I just know for a fact they did play together for a little bit. But yeah, they were mostly on the same pair. It was just they were on the same team. They were playing a lot together, as the team. But they weren't paired together for a long time.
Yeah.
Because they're both defensive players, right? I imagine they probably tried to balance the defense a little bit.
I think it might have been Sanderson and JBD, at least when Sanderson was there.
Yeah,
I think I remember we were so like.
Sanderson and Pinto, even though they weren't paired, obviously.
Yeah, I was gonna say
their short time together was very noticeable whenever they were both on the ice. Mm-hmm. So it's glad to see that was not a lie. I'm glad to see that held on.
Yeah, I was gonna say our enthusiasm as fans to watch the Sens like a few years ago was so dead that I was watching UND games on like the most jank hockey streams you could ever find, because how else are you going to watch a UND game in Canada?
In Ottawa,
just remember watching Sanderson, Pinto, and Clevin, and I think JBD for a little bit too. He was a little older than the rest of those three. So
yeah, he kind of left as soon as the other guys rose up.
But yeah, glad that we are at least watching all of those guys in the NHL now, and not having to just ignore the NHL team's games while we watch their top prospects games.
Yeah. I don't think there's too much left in the chat, though. It seems they're more so just talking about, well, I know we mentioned Buffalo, but another team having a slow start, obviously, are the Oilers, who were in the Stanley Cup final last year. So I just
Yeah.
think it's safe to say, as much as we were talking a little bit of, trouble around Buffalo, a, a slow start to an extent can be you can overcome it. We're only, what, 5 games in for some teams. I know Devils already at 7 games played because
Yeah,
of how
that's
early they
crazy.
started. But at least for the Sens, we're 4 games in and we're 2-2, which is quite literally as mediocre as you could statistically have. So I don't think any of us, are going to be raging too loud, especially because we've had injuries as well that have, made some of these matches a little bit tougher to play around. And even if you were to look at our team fully healthy, we're 1-1.
Yeah.
So I just think this is this game, if you want to summarize it in its totality, it's a loss, but it's not a loss to get mad about. It's a loss to look at, try and learn from, and hope you get a little bit luckier. And in general, I'm just happy that a lot of the worries that were sitting with us from that Thanksgiving game about the defense and goaltending have eased a little. Even with the loss, like just not as bad as we thought it was, which is usually the situation. Usually one game doesn't define a whole year.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to close it out on. The 2-2 start in the end is nothing to complain about so far, I would say. Yeah, the defensive and goaltending worries in the last game were the huge focus. Luckily, those
Even though
weren't.
we won.
Yeah, even though we won. So luckily, we didn't have to stress too much about those today. It's just they just got to work on those special teams, get Allmark back in the net, and I think I think overall things are looking pretty positive for the Sens. So
As
yeah.
long as the 5v5 stays good, this team, in theory, should be winning more games than they're losing.
Totally agree. So yeah, that'll do it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Subscribe to Game Over Ottawa if you are not subscribed already. Subscribe to the Game Over Network channel too. Hyperdrive Hockey, the flagship show over there. Leave a like on the stream if you enjoyed. Share it around to your friends as well. And yeah, have a good night, everyone.
And we're good.